Hello, welcome to the panel of Death May Die, the design journey, I think is what it's called. How many people were, I know one of you were here when we had the game out, we're showing it at 10 o'clock. Was there anyone else who saw that? Okay, so you're going to hear a little bit of what you heard then and saw, but we're going to talk a little bit more about how we got here, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. Take it away, Eric.
Hi. Oh my God. Maybe I'm just projecting too much. I'm Eric. This is Rob. I really want to say, and this is my other brother, Daryl.
Don't.
And so the Cthulhu Death May Die is our first collaboration. It is about a year and a half in the works, maybe a little longer.
No, about a year and a half. We spent 8 months working on a different game that we threw away, and then started this one in January of 2017.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, throwing away ideas is a time-honored tradition for game design.
Yep. And it is in fact, I honor that tradition. I honor that tradition maybe more than most, maybe more than one should.
Yeah, you enjoy it, actually.
A little bit. Maybe we should, I guess we'll start with the pitch, like the pitch of the game, a very brief introduction about the game, and then mostly the point of this panel was to share some insights with you into how we got to where we are from a designer point of view. I think the panel was called Redacted, a Design Journey, because when it submitted the panel, we weren't allowed to publish the title of the game. The game is Cthulhu Death May Die. And I would like very much for Rob to pitch the game because he pitches it better than I do.
1 second. All right. Cthulhu Death May Die is a cooperative game where you play a seasoned investigator in the Cthulhu world. You've seen some stuff. You've been around you know cultists, you know monsters. The good news is it's hard to drive you crazy. The bad news is it's because you're already insane. Eric kind of pitched this to me, and I was immediately hooked by the idea of, what if you weren't like a first-level investigator? A lot of Cthulhu is like, I'm walking, monster, I'm insane. Right? Like, you have no idea that this is coming, and then it happens, and then your mind snaps. And we said, well, some people have to survive that. Some people have to be like, oh, yeah, I remember the first time I saw an interdimensional being. Yep. That was weird, but now it's like every Tuesday I'm down in the sewer shooting cultists. And so it'd be fun to explore the intermediate power fantasy of a Cthulhu world rather than sort of the everyman, like the policeman who was like, what is this? And then snaps. I mean, that's fun, but there's a lot of games that do that. So in this game, you will play an investigator. The game comes with 6 different episodes, is what we're calling them. And an episode is a sort of a setting. It tells you like where you are and a little bit what you're trying to do and what monsters are there and what cards you can discover, like people or NPCs or items. And you combine that with one of the 2 elder ones that are in the box, either Cthulhu or Hastur. And so it might be that Hastur is being summoned in the catacombs, or it might be Hastur is being summoned at a cocktail party. Or it might be that Cthulhu is being summoned at the cocktail party. And depending on which sort of elder one and which, I always say scenario, episode you put together, you will have a slightly different game experience. Even if you played it with Cthulhu at the cocktail party, Hastur will give a different feel. His cultists have a different agenda and a different tone. It's a fully co-op game, and you will play, and one of several different things will happen. One, you will manage to mess up the cultist ritual, such as that when they summon their Elder One, they are very briefly mortal. Not a pushover, but mortal, and then you can shoot Cthulhu in the face. That's called winning. What often happens is you all die, or you fail to disrupt the ritual, and so he's never mortal, and then he's unkillable, or you run out of time, or you all go crazy. I mean, the usual. And I think it's not so much of a pitch as sort of a rambling, discussion at the end of the bar.
But that is the crystal clear vision of what the game is, and honestly, that hasn't changed much since we started. We went on a very standard creative process journey to get to here, but like we have visuals, right? I'm sure a lot of people know that right. Well, a lot of people when you see. This is my version of PowerPoint, by the way.
Did you just draw a circle? Like you're holding up a circle?
I'm holding
Okay.
what most people think the creative process is like, right? Most people think it looks like this, right? You start here, you get to there, but the creative process is actually, which is one of my favorite diagrams of all time, right? Right. Actually looks like that.
And oftentimes it ends up not at the circle you were setting out for, but one really close to it.
Right.
Yeah.
That one.
This game was similar to that. Is that your RAR guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Eric lives he lives on airplanes, but technically his mail goes to a place in Singapore. So he and I are very rarely in the same place. Although we're in conventions and we take time to go over and have meetings, we're going to be doing it here. The game's not quite done yet. So a lot of our stuff is done on Skype, and he likes to draw pictures like that and shove them in the camera and go, roar. So one of us is usually up early and one of us is up late because it's 12 hours difference from where we are. So we tend to meet at 8 o'clock, and we just decide who's the PM and who's the AM. Most of the time it's my morning and your night.
That's right.
Because I'm more of a morning person.
I'm just always on Skype.
And that's how we work. So we know the story. We don't have slides for this, so we know preparation. So it's a small group. Like, we want us to talk about something in particular. We want to take questions early. We can do it. We have the story of how this game came to pass. I mean, Eric said, do you want to make a game where you shoot Cthulhu in the face? I was like, yeah, hold on. That sounds interesting.
Right. And part of it, I do remember a part of it was, well, now we're skipping a little ahead.
We're going to tell this like in flashback mode.
It's going to be like an Aaron Sorkin TV show, right? We're starting in the middle, and then we're going to go, earlier that day. Right. One of the parts of that pitch was, I remember saying, so this specifically, like, how would you like to not make a legacy game?
Yes.
A big box game that's not legacy, emphatically so.
And I said, yes, please. And he said, it'll be just as complicated, but it just doesn't have the word legacy. I'm like, wait, hold on. That's not what I signed up for. Getting these different Elder Ones and episodes to all work together, and all of the insanities and all of the investigator powers and all of the items has proved to be this wonderful combinatorial sort of puzzle that we've been going on. You have a question?
Yeah, had you guys talked about games before this? Had ideas, have you met at conventions and kind of pitched ideas, and we're just kind of waiting on the right one, the right fit? Because I can see that Eric Lang, Rob Davieu rolling right. Maybe
Yep.
it wouldn't be the right fit for what people would expect.
Yeah.
So is this the first one, or are there others?
Eric Lang, Rob Davieu, rolling right.
I want to do a write and roll.
That's just flipping the script. So you've segued nicely into earlier that day, the true beginning of this game. So we have to be careful. We have to redact some of the details here. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, something like that. So Rob and I had always met at cons, right?
Yeah, it was April of 2016. We were at Unpub in Baltimore.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, so Unpub is a really cool event for unpublished designers to show their games to a very wide audience. And we had orbited in the past, right? I was like, hey, dude, I told him, like, I'm a big fan of Risk Legacy. And
I told him I've never played any of his games.
That's a true fact.
So.
And we have a common friend. We have a friend in common, Kevin Wilson, who explained working with Rob was like to me, and I was like, oh, he sounds like he's exactly on my wavelength. And so I believe I approached you
Yep.
and said, I'd like to work on a game that is kind of in your wheelhouse. And so we started talking about it. And I remember pretty distinctly at Unpub, we spent a couple hours just telling each other stories.
Yeah, and we started cooking up. This is the game that we eventually shelved, probably forever, maybe temporarily. We started telling stories about what we wanted. And that was more of a legacy game and what we didn't want. And we walked around and we got coffee and we had sandwiches and we told stories about games we liked and how we worked. And it's always interesting when you're working with someone, you're trying to figure out, how they work. What's their pressure points? What are the things that they're going to be good at? What are they going to be bad at? A lot of game design is throwing out really, really bad ideas and then in an attempt to find one that works. But it's a very vulnerable place, right? The last thing you want to do is someone's like, hey, what if we do this? The other person goes, that's stupid. What are you thinking, right? So you need to sort of establish that you can go back and forth and feel comfortable, like, what about this? What about that? What about this? Oh, I don't like this, and being able to articulate. So that's a lot of what we did right there. And I've worked with, there are many game designers, and I've partnered on a lot of games. I'm like the pit bull of game design. I just show up and start shouting in someone else's established brand. And some of them have been easier than others. I mean, not because they're bad game designers, just we have a different way of approaching games. And so Eric and I were talking about is we are very similar, I think.
Too similar.
Yeah, too similar.
Too similar. And we'll get to that later.
Or now.
Or now. Not similar enough.
So we worked on that game for the rest of 2016, and then the holidays came and we just took a natural break. And when we got back, we both were like, we had reached a natural sticking point that happens in a game. So we got back, and both of us were like, I don't really feel like unsticking this. And the other one's like, I forget who said it first, and I think I said it or you said it, and the other one's like, oh, me neither. What else can we do? Which is a very, very scary, because you just spend 8 months and hours and play testing sessions. And I had flown up to Toronto, where you were living at the time, and we had like a 3-day work session. And there was a publisher who was excited about the concept, and we just realized that game was going to be fine. And so it was not easy for me. It was easy for Eric. We just said, oh, let's start something else. And we started what became this. What are some of the things that we had in here that didn't work?
Some of the things we had in here that didn't. Well, so at the very, 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 very beginning, so the concept came to me before I approached Rob when I was actually looking at the whiteboard development schedule at CMON. And I saw a number of things. This is before I even started working at CMON. So I visited the Brazil office as I usually do, and I caught a glimpse of like, ooh, what's this cool stuff going on? And I saw some titles like, oh, that's neat, that's neat, that's neat. And I completely misread a title. I don't know how, like it had nothing to do with the title actually written there, but I was like, oh, that sounds cool, what is that? And they were like, oh, I don't know, I just wrote a title down. I was like, well, I'm now gonna work on that, because that sounds really cool. And that turned into this. So I'm a big Cthulhu fan. I worked on the Cthulhu collectible card game, later living card game for several years. And I knew that I wanted to do a game like this, but I knew it was going to be, in my head, the Venn diagram that got me really excited was Cthulhu Dungeon Crawl. And I know there are a lot of, as Rob said, very fine Cthulhu games that explore the investigation, the existential investigation spectrum of the Cthulhu mythos. But there wasn't really an action-packed, like Quentin Tarantino-esque, like cinematic, bloody and kinetic expression of that game. I wanted to be very storytelling and have a lot of storytelling elements, which is why Rob was the very, very first person I thought about. The original, my misinterpretation of what this was actually to model it after a game that already existed. Mm-hmm. Remember, based on the original title, which we can't share. But so we started off with something much less original.
Yeah, we started out thinking it was going to be modeled to an existing brand, and we started building off that brand, and then at some point we realized that was wrong. And we said, let's just make our own game. But some core elements we got right away, which was you have an insanity, and it will affect your play. And what we tried to do is, it's the type of thing that every once in a while, I think you summed it up earlier today, which is, you can trust all of the other players. It's a co-op game. You just can't always trust yourself. Like, wouldn't it be interesting if you lost agency of your character very briefly? I mean, obviously, you don't want it to be like every turn, roll a die. If you roll a 1, you go insane, and you're running around and you don't get to play your game. And could you leverage that into an advantage? Could you be like, wait, I'm about to snap and punch everything around me, so I'm going to run away from you and end my turn in this room with 6 monsters and hopefully snap and then punch them. And we lost that for a while, and then we got it back, which was a nice place to land on. And we had dice systems that didn't work.
We had very, very convoluted event systems.
Did we? I can't.
Yeah.
It's like, it's hard to. So one of the things about game design is it's hard to remember what you threw away, because you just move on to the next one. And what's even worse is 2 years from now, when someone asks me a rule for that, you also forget where you landed. You're like, how does this happen? You go, oh, I'm remembering like 19 iterations in the last month of that rule.
Especially when especially when there are changes that are made late in design, early development, right? Because right now the game is gelled into something that we both know, but it's still going to go through some small development changes here and there. Those will be the ones that are most easily forgotten.
Yeah, they'll say like, how does fire work? And I'm like, oh, how does fire work? There were 9 different fire rules that last month. I like fire rules now more than I did 2 weeks ago. So we had these like sort of, Eric and I are both cinematic people. We talk about TV and movies a lot, and we talk about scenes, and we talk about moods, and we talk about feel. So we're like, what if the game starts and it's on fire? Like, you just walk in the door like, oh, the room's on fire. And we'd have like different moments, some of which made it in the game and some didn't. I'm like, what if you jumped off a balcony and shot 2 people at the same time on your way down? What if you ran out into the night and jumped over a balcony, but you landed in water? And, like these moments that would happen. And a lot of times you're like, well, now Eric would come, he's like, you're just writing a role-playing game. And I'm like, yes, that's what I do. And then you have to say, like, well, what are the things that actually work but still have a rule system that's clean and elegant and underlying it? And what do you give up for cinema, for playability?
I remember one of the early crazy things I would say, let's do 6 games in one box, right? And 6 totally different games. We ended up in a pretty good place. So they're not totally different games, but we have 6 discrete experiences. My initial inclination for most games is to start at the stars and land on the moon, right? It sounds like, reaching for the stars sounds really great. It sounds mythically great, but you really don't want to be up there because it's space and you will die. Hypoxia, but
the moon is perfectly safe,
the moon
Eric.
is perfect. The moon has.
I can't follow your story when it lacks common physics groundings.
The moon is a source of gravity.
Okay.
And we've had people on the moon.
All right.
Including my great uncle. That's not true.
Okay.
But storytelling. We wanted. One common thing that we went a lot of ways. We did go a lot of ways around this, but we wanted to make sure that every episode that we played felt different. It had a different feel to it, and we wanted to make sure that some people would like some episodes better than others, and that's okay. I know that there was a period that when we started, I wanted this to be a game of high highs and low lows, which is a little bit counter to a trend I'm noticing in games lately, which is perfectly valid, perfectly fine. But a lot of games get balanced very, very, very even keel toward the middle, right? So to try to replicate a very similar game experience every time, right? Where everybody's going to ramp up at approximately the same speed, and you can take divergent paths, but you have a predictable rate of power accumulation, predictable rate of growth, and you guys are always going to end the game approximately really close to the goal or to each other, and there will be a winner. So I personally have fallen in love with games that just have that. Sometimes they are amazing, and you will never forget that game, and sometimes they crash, burn, and they absolutely crash and burn, but you still will never forget that because you kicked down the door, you died.
Right.
You won't. That's not going to happen here. But
That won't happen here. That'll happen in this other one. But no, and when Eric says that, I agree. It's a cinematic moment. I have a fondness for role-playing games of the '80s, and some games were harsher and they were more wild. I said I don't mind a game where you lose quickly and you die painfully, as long as two things: one, it was kind of awesome how it all went wrong, and two, you know why, so how to avoid it in the future. If you play a co-op game and you're like, wow, okay, new rule, put out fire before you run through the rooms that are on fire. Like, if you know, like, I didn't know fire was going to be that bad, right? Like, I read the rule, but then when I did it, that was really bad. Or don't let cultists build up, or don't charge against this monster until you have a weapon. As long as you can look and understand why, then I think just catastrophic failures are fun. Or you have a tightly honed experience where you have a near victory, but it lasted longer. And then you have that different gaming agony, like, oh, we were so close. What was the one thing we could have done different? And then you have the runaway success. I don't know if there's runaway successes in this game.
nope.
No. It is a Cthulhu game. And then you have the hard-earned success. So we're looking for games that the next day you're telling sort of this amazing story. That's sort of a rule of thumb for me, and I suspect Eric, well, you'll feel free to disagree because I know you. I love the idea of making a game that the next day when someone's telling their friend about a game and a third person overhears is like, what is this, a Netflix show? Is this a book you read? Like, what is this? Like, oh, it's a board game. You're like, what? Right, like that you're talking about characters, and then the room was on fire, and a monster broke down the door, and then like I found a gun at the last second, and I shot it, and then I ran away and got really lucky. Like, that's the story of my games. I have tried to make, like, I'm going to make a Euro game to prove I can, and I can't, because I'm just like, and then the blue cubes had a majority over the red cubes, like I'm without us. And then I drew the chip that gave me the advantage for the power that let me get an extra action for the worker where I could be on the same stage. Like, these are wonderful games, and I love playing them. If I don't have a story to guide me, as soon as I get stuck, I don't know what I want people talking about the next day. And that's why I sort of fall apart. So this is how Eric and I do it. And sometimes we just get a little too excited about story.
Yep. It's a true fact. I mean, we've spent at least... Well, we spent too much time. I remember we had a few sessions where we just told each other stories, and like, oh, session's over. Maybe we should design a game about this someday. But
Yep.
I don't remember how many episodes we started off with, but we did. We usually do brainstorms together early.
Yeah, this game has been like, I think, honestly, about 4 or 5 times, like, okay, core system's done. Now let's tune and polish and develop. And then like the next week, like, oh, I have an idea. And we just completely change what we said was done a couple times. And it's always gotten better each time. We were at Essen last year in Germany. And I'm like, man, this thing's taking a while, Eric. And the deadline was earlier at the time. The Kickstarter was going to be a little earlier. Like, we can't stop. We got to stop changing it and just start making content and testing. And he's like, I agree. And then half an hour later, we had a much better idea of how the episodes go together and the card decks go together. And it's like, what if we didn't have a common card deck of like bad things? What if like we're like, oh, and then we start talking about what's in here now, about there's just contained boxes. We should probably.
That's right. Actually, it came from this came from a product angle rather than a design angle, but it did inform the design quite a bit. So I remember this conversation very well. We were because we were talking about we were actually starting to, as designers do, stop talking about design, starting to, like, talk about like how are we going to lay out our tokens on the punch board, and how do we make sure that we have a common pool of tokens that will work in every single episode. And
we started saying, how big is this box going to be?
Right. How big? Well, I didn't care about that, Simon, but so yeah, we hit a point where like, so they go like, all right, are we sure we want to use this token? It's only really used in this episode. And I think one of us at one point were like, yeah, so let's have it only in this episode. So then came up with this, right? So this is close to how the game's going to get packaged. You're going to open up these little boxes. Here's a box for Cthulhu. There's a box for Haster, right? And here's a when you want to play. There's more in here, but you choose. Like, I'm going to play this episode 4, which is Eldritch Idols, and we're going to fight Cthulhu, and we're going to take all the stuff we want out of this box. This is the Cthulhu kit. This is the Eldritch Idols kit, and this comes with its own tokens and its own rule set that is only used in this episode. And when you're done, you put it back in the box because you're not going to need it for any other episode. It helps that thought really crystallized in a physical form how different the experience between episodes was going to play. And it's one of those things where you can talk about it abstractly. Yeah, we want every game to be kind of different, but it was the actual physical manifestation of that. We drew pictures at the show, like little 3D pictures of what the box interior would look like, and that drove a lot of new design decisions, and it opened up how we design these episodes.
Yeah, that's, I think, the difference when you've been working as a professional designer for a while. Like, at least for me, I always have my product designer hat on. Like, how does this fit in the box? What's the size of the punch boards? What's the retail going to be? Like, ultimately, that has to happen. And if you don't think about it at the beginning, either the publisher is going to have to change your design to make it work, or someone else downstream is going to make that decision and may unconsciously change things that aren't good. So fairly early on, I'm always thinking like, well, how does this fit in the box, and how does this do this? And when we got to these episodes, and it was like, oh, every one of these contains X number of cards and one punch board and like a setup card and a couple, things. And it's like, oh, great, I got it now. Like, I can see, and if everyone has a punch board with tokens, that means you can have whatever custom tokens you want, and you don't have to worry about, well, we're only using this green goo token in one episode. Like, why are we going to put it on a common punch board? And it's like, well, no, it goes in here. And this one doesn't have it yet, but it tells you on the back everything that's in the box, so you know what to put back there. And we were even talking at the time, this is something Eric has loved talking about.
I do.
Is
I don't know what
episodes, not scenarios. Eric always said, this is like an 80s TV show that got canceled. And the boxes should be VHS boxes, right? Almost like when you're pulling out an episode that you've bought it from like a Blockbuster liquidation sale, and you're like, what is this show, right? And it's this series that's sort of like pre-X-Files, like Kolchak the Night Hunter, that's this sort of campy fun. And it didn't quite materialize that way, that they're VHS boxes, but it guides us behind the scenes, right? We're like, he's like, we'll be thinking of an episode. It's like, this is the episode where they kind of jumped the shark and the writers did something kind of crazy, and then the producers came in and yelled and said, no, you got to do something more straightforward. And so we designed these like little TV episodes in our head, like, oh, is this the one that takes place underground? Oh, this is the chase one, right? This is the one where the heroes start in trouble. And it's like we've tried to design them like they're TV episodes, a little bit from the 80s.
A little bit from very tropey.
Yeah, I mean, we're not doing high art here. He yells at me for that.
Yeah, that's true. So I can say unequivocally that Rob is a better writer than me. I am a writer, I have a different style of writing. I call it worse. And so my background is screenwriting entirely, right? I've never aspired to write the great American novel or anything like that. I did go to school for screenwriting, and that's my medium of choice. But so Rob would fairly often come to me with these like really cool stories with subplots and themes and textures and stuff. And I would often look at the card and say, but why do I care? What's the two-sentence thing what is the two-word thing I can say that's cool for me?
Mm-hmm. You'd always say like, yeah, that's a great subplot. Because I would be caught up in like, what if in this episode there's 3 NPCs and they're caught in a love triangle and you're running into them and you can decide, and then this whole, and some stuff's still in there at a lighter way, and he goes, how does this lead to shooting Cthulhu in the face? And I go, oh, you're right. And so he was always pulling for like TV trope, like real digestible, not heavyweight sort of like, here's an episode, and it's sort of like watching a CSI, like, yeah, there'll be some background stuff, but you're there to watch them solve a mystery. It's a procedural. And I was trying to do more like Lost, right? And then they all tie together, and then this character comes back in this episode from this episode, but he's like, stop it. You're shooting Cthulhu in the face. So between those 2 points, we ended up somewhere in the middle. A lot of these episodes have like what I call a B plot. Like if you're talking about TV, you've got your A plot, and then your B plot is going on sort of under the scenes. They're still in there. Yep. You lay out all the cards and you look at it and be like, oh, I see, there was this little story going on that sort of got interrupted by cultists, and so there was a cocktail party or a masquerade ball as one of the episodes. And so, well, before the cultists showed up and started summoning their evil god, there were people at the masquerade ball. Like, what are they doing there? What's their goal? How are people going to react? And it just helps me write cards that are interesting if they've got a point. I mean, otherwise, just, oh, here's a gun, shoot someone with it.
And to be fair, a lot of it, I mean, I've spent a lot of time playing this game with what we're playing or watching people play now that we're out of design for the most part. Watch people, and I notice after you don't run through most of the Mythos or Discovery decks, the two core content decks in each episode. You don't run through all of them every game. There's a high degree of replayability, but I've noticed that people have very often pieced together these little things, like oh yeah, I remember the monkey paw. That's cool. Spoiler alert: something is up with the monkey paw, but they bring it up independently, right? And it is subtext and subplot, but the thing I do like about that is those vignettes is that often they do lead to cool gameplay, right? They lead you to anticipate a combo of some kind. And so the story always comes from the player's point of view, which is one of the main things I was pushing for.
Yeah, slight spoiler, but you're here. So it's just one of the things I love at the Masquerade Ball is I need to put a gun in, and like a vial of poison or something that you're going to use. And then I ended up writing that there was a wronged wife. There's a husband there with his, person he's having an affair on the side, and so the wife leaves the poison near the punch bowl. But it doesn't take it, and he grabs the champagne bottle, which is another thing you can get, and it's not just a gun; it's a pearl-handled pistol. That she was there's this little murder mystery that happens to be taking place before the game starts, and it's well, what is it really? You get a gun, you get a poison, you get a bottle of champagne, you get a companion. What's that?
A little vignette.
It's a little vignette. So I call it the B plot. Oh, the B plot was there was this little tryst going on that the wife found out about, and she's a vengeful person. So now I have an NPC of the wife who's a great fighter, who's all fired up, and her gun and her poison. And it populated the exact same thing with a different story. You might not notice, I got the poison, I got the gun, I got this woman, she's mad about something. It doesn't matter. You got these cool things to shoot Cthulhu in the face. But if you want to see a little bit more of a vignette or a story, it's those sorts of things that we got to kind of bury in there. That
actually leads to a big challenge, though, right? Because one of the key points toward for this story is that we wanted to make sure that because of the way the game is very high variance, right? And we want to make sure that it is, every time you play it is going to unfold in different ways. And we want to make sure that all the stories make sense to a degree, no matter what order the events come up. And so, it's easy to say, right? Of course, that is a very admirable goal. But the numbers of stories that we could write that work like that is actually not very, very high.
Yep.
But it's very rewarding to see when that happens. So you don't have to find the monkey paw and the monkey in order. And it's kind of funny when you don't. But they do both lead to very different experiences in play. Sometimes you only find one, not the other. Sometimes you'll find none.
Yep. Yeah, the monkey and the monkey paw is the key one. You can find a one-handed monkey, and then you can find a monkey paw. And if the monkey's with you, when he finds the monkey paw, he is pissed.
That's a true fact.
So sometimes you find one, sometimes you find the other, and sometimes you find the paw first, and you're like, ooh, glad I don't have this monkey. And then later on you find the monkey, you're like, oh, God, okay, I'm glad that we already found the monkey paw. Just that sort of stuff we wanted to put in there, just so that there's a little bit more texture other than run and gun.
Absolutely. You had a question?
So, as far as the episodes go, they go from beginning to end, I'm assuming. Do the episodes scale in difficulty, like if you play it over and over again, or
Not
all one ending story?
so. Just to restate the question. So, do the episodes scale in difficulty, and are they in order? So, we want to make sure the episodes all stand alone, right? Back to the sort of AV's TV show metaphor. We want to make sure every episode stands alone, and it doesn't matter what order you play them in. You'll have a different experience. But to a degree, they are more complex. So the backstory is a little bit more complex. We introduce slightly more complex mechanics in some of the later stories, but complex because we want to do some crazy different things, not because it's necessarily harder.
Yeah, I mean, I think the procedural is a good analogy. Like, the goal of every police procedural is to solve the crime. And so the object of each one of this is to disrupt the ritual, to make the elder god vulnerable so you can kill them.
Right. But it's a nice
how
tool.
you have to do it changes, and the level of complexity of solving that puzzle may change. And then there'll be variants, as Eric said, which is which Mythos cards did you draw, which are like the bad cards that you draw at the end of every turn because it's a co-op. And did you not? Oh, I never found the pistol. It would have been nice to have a weapon in this one, so I had to solve the puzzle in a different way. But they all end the same way, which is you've either destroyed the god or been destroyed by the god. But the tiles are different. Those are common. So, like, you set up the story, so you're like, oh, here's a staircase that, is used in 3 different episodes. And then there's some big set pieces one. There's an observatory and, things like that. Where's the skeleton one? It's not in there?
Not in here.
Character dies in the first episode. You go to the second one, but you still use it.
Sure.
You reset and start again.
Yeah,
Recast.
It's not a legacy game at all. It's just you have a lot of variety of what you would like to do. So you'll be like, who do you want to be? Like, it's a typical normal game. The numbering of episodes is just to show that they ramp up very slightly in sort of rules complexity. Like yeah.
Question, sir. How many players? 1 to 5.
Yeah, the 1 player is you play 2 characters. You play the 2-player game and you go back and forth. It's a completely cooperative game, so there's no reason why you can't play it. And since it plays 2-player, you could play with 4 characters if you wanted, but it's pretty easy to manage 2. So that's what we recommend.
This actually came up. This came up early in our design talks because having taken part in many CMON Kickstarters, and no matter what game we put on Kickstarter, no matter what, one of the most commonly asked questions is solo mode. Can we have solo mode? And we're not going to compromise the integrity of gameplay just to put in every feature. But it's always in the back of my mind, if solo mode makes sense, yes, we will put it in, we will broadcast it loudly. Question, sir?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a CMON game.
This is Simon. Yeah. This which is funny because I've been doing this for 20 years, and so I'm used to playing with prototypes and army figures and representing and graphics, and I still fell under the spell of weeks ago, not that long. Eric, we got on a call, and it's a Skype call, and he had the table with the real graphics, with the real figures. I'm like, this game is amazing! Like, even spending all this time with it, suddenly seeing the real stuff on the real art was like, whoa! We all play this because we games are a visual medium, and this is no different. So you'd say, oh, that must be Cthulhu who you're summoning.
That is the star spawn of Cthulhu.
That's Cthulhu who you're summoning, actual size. So he will be on the board. You are much shorter. He walks along, and then when he comes on the board, he gets all up in your face. So there are many figures in the core
family
box.
game.
Do you know the number of the core figures?
I used to know it off by heart. It is about 35-ish.
Including the investigators?
Yeah, some investigators, a bunch of monsters.
Cultists?
Cultists. Yes, the game has a steady diet of cultists.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sir.
There it is.
Perfect representation.
Concept reality.
We don't even need artists. Sorry, just at the back, sir.
If you were to go through and maybe paint each of the figures before playing it, would that give away any secrets that you shouldn't have revealed?
No. You can. I would recommend. You should go paint everything because they're awesome. They're awesome minis. But just if discovery is a big plus for you, one of the reasons why we did put everything in boxes and stuff. Just don't read the paper product. Don't look at the tokens. Don't look at the episode boards. Don't look at the cards, and just do the monsters. I mean, it is based on the Lovecraftian mythos, right? So if you know anything about the mythos, you will have a very good idea of what a lot of the monsters are. But we put our own spin on most of them. So lead artist Adrian Smith, who did art for Blood Rage and Rising Sun, he's also a big fan of the Cthulhu Mythos. Turns out a much bigger fan than I was even. I gave him zero art direction. I was just like, this is a list of the monsters we want, and here's a soundtrack. Here's a heavy metal soundtrack. And in fact, I made him a mixtape.
You did. That's awesome.
And he just pumped these in. And one of the things, so I'm not going to spoil the actual monsters, but he actually had a crisis of not a crisis of conscience, a crisis of something. I don't remember what it is. I'm too tired for wit today, but. He had a professional crisis where he was like, he showed me this picture of a monster, which is in traditional Lovecraftian lore, doesn't really look that cool, right? It's like, this looks dumb. I mean, it's true to the lore, but it's like, I don't like how it looks. It's not badass enough. So I said, so make it badass. I actually literally just wrote him an email, said, make it cool. Go ahead. And he went back and he made it cool. And it's not 100% true to the mythos, but the cool thing about the mythos is most monsters are described as indescribable. So we just said, nah, we're going to describe it. There it is.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
In your last panel, you mentioned that you like that gimmicks, that they're cool. So in this game, like, what is the gimmick?
The gimmicks are like a contained box that you put together, the TV type concept, the miniatures. Those are the big hooks.
Show, don't tell.
Yeah. Here?
I think so. So the big issue is that I am under very strict orders not to let other people touch the resins. So I might set up at a table and let some people watch, and I'll be like, just tell me what to do, and I'll move everything around. The thing is, I only brought enough material for one episode, and I want to make sure not to spoil too much for people who don't want spoilers for some of the gameplay. So we'll probably just play a few turns to get you guys into the. That's an excellent question to which I do not have an answer at this very moment. But what we'll do is, we'll go to the main game room, and they make announcements there regularly. When we're set and we have a table, I'll make sure that they announce it.
Yeah. Well, I won't be available today, but I'll have more time as I go. I have a 5-panel day.
Just the
guy behind you.
The gentleman behind you is very patient. We'll be right with you.
We're talking about storytelling in board games, and obviously this is a Cthulhu game, so it's based on old writings from Lovecraft and his tentacle. How much inspiration do you get from those writings that makes you create this game, or are you taking things from your own inspiration and putting in the role?
I can answer that.
So the question, I'll just rephrase this question so everybody can hear it. So the game is based on the Lovecraftian mythos. How much inspiration did we take from the actual stories? A lot, actually. I mean, I am a fan of the mythos. I've read basically every story. Some of them a long time ago, but I have read quite a bit of them as research for the CCG. Now, Rob is actually not a huge fan of the mythos. Like he's.
I know it.
He knows it.
But not that well. So this is why I'm spending my time talking about love triangles and monkeys that have been done, right? I'm trying to add the B plots and everything. So Eric and I will work on the figures together, and I'm like, who's that tentacle-faced guy? And he's like, this is this, and this is his powers. I'm like, cool, right? So I tend to write, I think it's 1920s, what's going on? Oh, there's a cocktail party, or, what are names? Oh, Thaddeus, that's a good 1920s name. So I'm trying to add richness to the world that existed before the before, the cultists showed up. Eric's doing more of the cultist stuff. Also, there's a designer writer who helped me with Betrayal Legacy. He was like the lead haunt guy. Right when we finished that, he's a big Cthulhu guy. He's done a lot of stuff. So I will regularly consult him, like, hey, I'm doing these 15 cards, and he'll pull out a name for me or something that fits the mythos as well. So I'm using him as a consultant to make sure that I honor the material.
But from a vision standpoint, the watchword we're looking for is Lovecraft-esque, right? You've already read the stories. We're not going to recreate his works. There are many games that do that, and so we did want a fresh take. So we spent, and of course, I mean, we were in the modern era too. So we wanted to sort of update that a little bit and have. We want to feature some things that may not be in. Some things, so we want like a little bit like a more diverse cast of characters, more modern sensibilities. We kind of ignored some of the problematic elements of his writing from the past and just focused on the really cool ideas. But of course, made it more. Remember that for those of you who do read Lovecraft, right? I mean, he writes essential horror, right? The unknown. Nothing is more scary than the unknowable. Like, well, but we know it's this. Kill this. That is our twist.
Yeah, so we went a little bit more action adventure and a little less growing mystery. There's no growing mystery. It's like that guy's going to be on the board in 8 turns. Go burn those things down so we can shoot them, right? So it went less of what's happening and mystery and growing sense and who's the god and what's happening. Lots of wonderful games and role-playing games that evoke that. We went to another Tuesday, another god to shoot in the face sort of approach.
Now, having said that, like you will discover parts of the story over several games.
There's not one big story, but if you play like episode 5 right there, Accursed Tide, and you will have no idea what Accursed Tide is, and then you read it and you go, oh, that's cool, but it's more of like, what's the mechanic that we put in? Right. What's the way that you have to disrupt the ritual? What are some? You're like, oh, I see. And when we find these cards, there's like a new little mechanism. So a lot of the discovery is figuring out how to disrupt the ritual and then be surprised when you draw a card and you're like, oh, whoa, okay, well, that person's mad because I'm with this person. Guess I should have seen that coming, and less about the horror mystery of what's behind the door or what's in the shadows or what tentacle is that.
So it's a bit like Pandemic in that sense, where you're piling on the pressure because you know what's going to happen.
Well, it's a cooperative game.
Right.
Right, so it's a full knowledge cooperative game. Well,
you don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? Because if you don't look at the Mythos text before you start, there is a lot of new stuff that's coming, but you do get to discover it and then react to it. And the Mythos cards do recur, right? So as you go through as you draw Mythos cards, once you have a certain number, well, 3. Once 3 of them of a certain type come up, there will be a great event in the game. The Elder One will go up on the track and a bunch of terrible things will happen, and then you'll shuffle all those cards back in the deck. So you will, the first time you see it, it's like, oh, shame on me. The second time you see it, shame on you.
yes.
Kickstarter on July 10th, this coming Tuesday.
Yep, 5 days the Kickstarter goes up.
Sir, you waited patiently. 1 question, not 3. 1.
An investigator?
How big is a person? I will show you a person.
Any other questions while he's looking?
Super sassy and say here.
The monkey does not have a miniature. I mean, you can put a miniature in. As you play the game, there are, and you go through the discovery deck, for the most part, there's 3 types of cards you get: an item, a companion, or a condition.
There you go. So there's Adam the Investigator's 32 millimeter. That's
So he's a good 6 feet tall. So this guy is 20 feet tall to the head.
we
30
call
to the
this
wings.
ruh-roh.
Yeah,
But he has a gun, good for shooting in face.
yeah. Yeah, the discovery deck, we have this idea where you draw a card and then often you have a choice between do you do nothing, and then there's usually something on the left side of the card and something on the right side of the card. Some of them there's just one, but often there's 2 things. And it's like, do you want the left side of the card or the right? And you tuck it under your player board, either on the left or the right. So you meet someone, you're like, do I want you to come with me and get this power, or do I just want to take that gun you're holding and take that gun? And so, or sometimes you might have to accomplish something, like you may have to make a roll or pay, a certain cost in order to get one or the other, so you may not have a choice. And then the last thing sometimes is some of the cards have a condition, which is someone says, help me, and if you're unable to help them, then you take the condition like guilty conscience or paranoid, and then there'll be other cards that come up like, hey, if anyone's paranoid, they take a stress. And so like these are the sorts of emergent things that come out. That's where the mystery is. It's like, uh-oh, I just became paranoid. What's that mean? Like, we'll see. And then 2 cards later, like, that's what it means right there. Okay, that's bad. It's always going to be bad. So,
Question, sir.
What did you guys learn from each other through this process, and how did you grow as designers kind of working on this team together?
What did we learn from each other?
I learned how to do an Eric impression. I learned Eric is very, very good at coming up with solutions quickly. It's kind of annoying because I will frame the problem like, no, I still think that this is too slow and the problem is here and then the math doesn't work out and there's not enough turns for this to happen and we're trying to this and it'll be like, oh, dude, wait, no, got it. And then boom, the answer will just come out like right there. I'm like, damn it, I hadn't even finished framing yes, that's a good solution. We're just doing that. I'll go off to my writer corner. I would have gotten there next week.
I mean, so Rob is Rob is a foodie. I don't know how much you guys know this, and this matters. So something we know about foodies is that they are unbelievably fussy, right? For good reason. They enjoy food to a level that many of us don't. Rob takes that fussiness into gameplay. So most people think that I'm I don't know why I've gained a reputation for being a very, very technical-oriented designer, right? I'm actually not at all. I do it because I have to, and I'm always dragged kicking and screaming into the last technical portions of design. So I actually prefer to write components in English, right? In clear, colorful language that most people will get. And I really enjoy mixing flavor and mechanics on a card. So I like, so sometimes I want to insist that, like if it's a different game because I don't want to spoil too much about this, right? There's a panda card for the Munchkin CCG called Bumbles, and I was very insistent that if somebody kills them, they take a big penalty. So I said, if you kill poor Bumbles, this will happen. I was very insistent that you have to say poor Bumbles because people will then understand, oh, I killed a poor panda, and et cetera, et cetera. Rob doesn't let me get away with any of that.
That is categorically untrue, but makes a good story.
Categorically untrue.
I have been on the front lines of ambiguity in rules and ambiguity in cards, and actually Matt Leacock is the one who is incredibly precise, and I'm the casual one there, and then Eric out-casualed me. So when we had cards, I was like, there's like investigator powers, and almost like, and then this happens, and then like you just introduce keywords.
That's right.
Right? And then like shuffle a discard I'm like, we've never used shuffle or discard before. He's like, yeah, people know what they mean. And I'm like, I don't want to be on BGG boards like answering these questions. And so I'm trying to just add some bit of precision. But yeah, no, like if you were in my last talk, I was talking about Betrayal Legacy. I'm a first edition D&D player. I'm like, you know what it means. You'll figure it out. I've discovered the hard way. A lot of people are like, no, I don't. Please tell me. And I'm like, just do what seems fair. And they're like, fair is me winning right now. Like, no, that's not fair. That's not fair at all. And they're like, but you could read it that way. I'm like, yeah, but come on. Clearly, I didn't mean that. I have learned from making mistakes. But yes,
So the casual scale goes Matt Leacock.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Eric's just like very breezy with the language.
No, I do tighten it up, but always kicking and screaming. Always.
But usually in other places, I'm the one going, like Matt on the pandemic stuff, will be like, we need to say this better. I'm like, people know what it means. He's like, no, and we will have a shared screen and a text box and rewrite a rule 19 times until we feel like it fits in the box and says exactly what it means. And then I'll answer an FAQ 2 years later when no one understands it. But we try.
Yes, sir.
How difficult was it because of this Skype method that you've been using to actually get on the same track on the cooperative bit and to actually design it together? Because, as you said, one of you 8 o'clock in the morning, the other's one at 8 o'clock in the evening, and to stay on track with the game at the same time, be in the same sort of like wheelhouse, so so that one's not going on a different road to the other? How difficult is it because of that separation?
It's project management, and sometimes it's worked more often than it's not worked. I mean, any project where you have two people, suddenly someone is in a different brain space than someone else. We tend to talk at a top level on the calls and then divide and conquer of what we're going to do so we don't mess up each other. Like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to write all of these episode cards. I'm going to refine the monster powers. And then we don't step. And that's the nice thing about having two different boxes is, you know, I'm like, I'm doing this box, and Eric's like, I'm doing that box. Like, great. And then you put them together, and you're like, oh, actually, those go well together, and they have a slightly different flavor. Or, no, we did two of the same card, or, oh, we said this differently. But that's just tuning things up.
And we talk a lot top level too, right? Like to understand where we're aiming for on each box.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is when we're on the calls, it's like, oh, we need to make more decisions on the discovery cards. People are playing, and they don't like the ones that only have something on one side. They really like choosing between two. And I'm like, oh, and then this card really hit, and I noticed this card was a problem, and the language wasn't working here. I'm like, I played, and this power seems broken. And then we talk about, like, well, how powerful do we want powers to be? What is the power fantasy here? Do we want to, like, let people have awesome powers and make the monsters harder, or do we want to make the powers weaker and then keep the monsters where they are? And then we decide who's doing what after that, and that we sort of work asynchronously and then get back together.
And experience helps too. I mean, we've both been doing this a long time. So the division of labor is that part's pretty standard, actually, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's every time I collaborate, you tend to talk at a general level, unless you're like trying to solve some thorny particular problem, and then it might be like, hold on, let's fill this in right now because we can make it real. But a lot of times, again, I'm just going to go back with Matt and I as a comparison. It's almost the same thing. I do all the rules, I do all the flavor writing on the cards, he does the actual physical design of the thing, and then everything else is collaborative. Like, not the physical design, like he makes the prototype kit. Like, he will make the icons, and he will lay out the cards, and he will, we divide that stuff because it's just sort of procedural. Like, okay, I'll redo the rules to match it, but then the actual design decisions we tend to do together and spend a lot of time talking. And then once we have the idea, he's like, okay, you put it into the rules, you put it onto these stickers, I'll put it the place where the stickers go, I'll do this, and we'll go from there. So division of labor is essential.
How do you create a prototype?
Well, we have staff. So
Eric has staff. I have me. Just don't get too caught up with what it looks like, right? Like I have in my basement a bunch of figures that I've cobbled. Sometimes when I go to get rid of a game, I'm like, I just scrape all the parts out of it. So I have army men and tanks and figures and cubes and cards, and you just don't care what it looks like, and you just play the crummy looking version. It's just part of my job is printing and sleeving and cutting and making. I mean, the tokens are a mess. Like, okay, so the orange ones aren't fire. The orange ones represent a gate because I didn't have enough orange tokens to be fire. Fire is actually yellow, but except for this one, which is thicker because that's a yellow gate. Let's start playing, right?
Sir?
Played Rising Sun, which is a great game, and love
Thank you.
the figures. They're beautiful. When do you decide, and I can't imagine that game now without the figures, can you really bring the game to life? So how central is the decision making on a figure, whether to use figurines, big ones, small ones, you know what I mean? Is that a pivotal decision early on in the process?
Oh, sure.
Throughout the game design?
Yeah, I mean, so your question is how pivotal are these, right? The decision to use figures. I mean, in this game, we knew Simon was going to be the publisher. We knew what the game was going to be. We knew it was going to have figures. I don't think there was ever a moment of this game discussed where we didn't think we would use figures.
Right. Just do a bit of a deep dive. The decision you have to make is, I'm so afraid I'm going to break this. How big is that base? Because it goes on a track, and then it has to go onto a tile, and then it has to fit on the tile. So the minimum space, like what size do the tiles become so that you can fit that guy plus 2 other people, 3 other people before they're crowded? And then how many punch boards does that fit on? And then how deep is the box? Like, this is where I was saying, talking about making it a product. It's the type of stuff that we ended up talking about early on, and it kind of makes a difference because I think we played the game and we're like, all the rooms are too small. The miniatures won't fit. So then we decided to make them really big, and they're like, this takes a ping pong table. Okay. And then, we had to figure out everything in between. Actually, I just realized we're out of time. I don't even know if we'll do one more question because you made a sad face. And we'll have to answer it very, very quickly. And then we will be around the show if you have further questions that we didn't get to.
Mine was just a general question about the Kickstarter that's coming up and the CMON Kickstarter. Because this is a CMON Kickstarter game, I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of extras that happen. Is there going to be extra content, like kind of like a DLC that we could purchase as well, or is everything pretty much here and this is what we're getting, which I think is fine either way. I just want to know how much money I have to save up.
So your question is how much stuff beyond the core box is going to be on the Kickstarter. So I cannot speak too much to that, except to say we are CMON. You have seen our Kickstarters. I've designed for CMON for a very long time. Rob has now designed for CMON for a year and a half. We know what we're getting into. This is a big box. There's a lot of content, and just looking at it, it looks like it would be theoretically ripe for expansion. If you were to say that, I would say, well, maybe.
Tuesday, all will be revealed.
Nope.
No,
Some of
Tuesday,
it.
some will be revealed. And then sometime by the end of the Kickstarter, whose time and date I don't know and wouldn't be allowed to say, more will be revealed.
I have staff.
Yeah, he has an office that 3D prints. I do not 3D print. I haven't had to as of yet. Finding someone who could do. I know people who could do it. We did have to do it for my other company, for Fireball Island, to test some things. So I outsource it. I would love to answer two things. We're out of time and they need the stage, and I haven't eaten lunch yet. So I'm going to have to defer to help find me on the floor.
Thank you, guys.